Welcome, wild ones and witches, to a very cozy weekend where we're going to have a cup of tea. I've got some peppermint in the pot. It smells wonderful already. Actually, this is an aroma that takes me right back to my childhood and going around this old abbey. I won't go into the detail, but it's amazing, isn't it, how just the smell of something can like take you back in time. So we're going to enjoy some peppermint tea together. We're going to have the furries with us, so probably be dog noises. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about my experience of tarot. It's something that I am very passionate about, something I've done for a very, very long time. Runs through my family to an extent on my mother's side. So I'm just going to shuffle my deck because I'm actually going to let the tarot direct the conversation, and I'm going to do this a bit like a Q&A, but with my tarot deck asking the questions. Okay, so the first card is Strength. So the first thing it makes me think about is, how do you get strong at learning the tarot? This is a question that I've been asked before when I've given readings for people. They've witnessed me doing a reading. They said, how can I understand the meanings of all of these cards? And honestly, I think it's something that comes over time. I think people work with the cards in different ways. So some people work with the cards and they will also work with their spirit guides. Some people might refer to spirit as sort of like a godlike, all-knowing energy that's communicating with them. Some people might rely on their intuition, and other people will use a guidebook. Now, I'm sorry, wild ones and witches, if you always rely on your guidebook, I don't mean to offend you. There are times when I use a guidebook as well, and it's also partly how I learnt. But what I will say is that, in my opinion, a lot of modern decks really sort of water down the meanings of these cards, and they sort of dumb it down to quite an extent. And I've seen tarot readers online that kind of have what I would say a very sort of basic fundamental knowledge of the cards. And then I've seen other tarot readers where I've really felt like, yeah, they're kind of using their intuition and they're using their knowledge, and I could understand that they had an in-depth knowledge of those cards. So depending upon what deck you buy and whether it comes with a guidebook or not, I think that really does impact your first foundational knowledge. And so I think that if you want to, just like any subject matter area, if you want to become good at something, you have to have the right foundation, a strong foundation to start from, and then you build from that, and you know, you can't really go wrong. So I think if I was to be learning now, or if I was offering advice on how to learn, I would probably suggest that you get a simple deck. You know, for me, using a deck like the Rider-Waite is a good start point. I wouldn't say get the decks that already have the meanings written on them. I think that's because it sort of programs you in a very sort of basic way as to how to learn the meanings, but perhaps doesn't give you that in-depth of knowledge, as well as, in a way, it's a little lazy. You know, you're not really using your own intuition when you're reading. And so once you then change to using a deck without those keywords, you might feel a little lost, or you might sort of only come up with the same meanings every time. And I think that tarot is not prescriptive in that way. So when you lay your spread, it's not just about knowing what each card traditionally means, but also the relationships in relation to one another and where they land in your spread, and giving meaning to the spread that you're using. So I think there's a lot of layers to learning tarot. So I'm just going to shuffle. I'm going to see what card we get next and sort of what comes to mind as the question. Whoops. So I've got the Three of Swords. So this makes me think about how to handle difficult cards. So the Three of Swords is quite an unhappy card when you pull this. I do feel that most cards, probably all the cards, have a duality. So that's to say that, you know, there can be a positive side to what one might perceive as a negative situation. So for example, I see the Three of Swords as being a bit like a blister. And sometimes, you know, you have to pop something I hope you're not having your tea, but you have to pop something and it all gets a bit nasty and horrible and unpleasant. And I also see the Three of Swords as being quite a temporary situation too, so very much like a blister, and then all the toxins come out, so say all the upset of a situation comes out, and that then allows that healing process to really begin. And also, if you value truth, I think sometimes the Three of Swords can be a truth card as well, where it's a truth you don't want to hear. So I think that when undertaking tarot, when learning it, when doing readings for yourself or receiving a reading, you need to be able to see, receive, and hear feedback you maybe don't want to hear, because otherwise what will happen is we read into the cards what we always want to see. You know, it's like the magic mirror that always gives us the compliments, you know, like the evil witch in Snow White. We look into the mirror and we want to always hear and see what makes us comfortable. And for me, the tarot isn't about making me feel comfortable. It's an oracle that I use. So I think that's really important. And I feel like when we give a reading, there is a duty of responsibility. You know, if we're giving that reading to somebody who is having a lot of difficulties and it's quite clear that they're not going to be able to cope with hearing a negative message, then I think maybe we need to think about whether or not we're being responsible about giving the reading to that person. I think another aspect is that depending upon your views, you know, some people will say tarot can predict the future, other people will say your future is in your own hands. And I sometimes sit in between that. So sometimes we might get a negative card appearing in the future part of a reading, and that's something that could be avoided depending upon a present decision or a present choice. Sometimes I do think when we get like repeating cards, there can be an inevitability to an outcome. But I think it's important to remember that just like the Three of Swords, this too shall pass, and life is unfortunately about challenges and difficult situations, and being able to accept that and to know that once that's happened and the healing process has occurred, then naturally there will also be positive things that happen too. And I think the learning part of every difficult situation in life is very valuable as well. So when we're giving a reading and we see a card like this, I think our delivery is also really important. But that's not to say that we should omit saying truthful things or things we feel are true. And of course, you know, we can't prove that the tarot is legitimate. A lot of people would say that it's not. A lot of people would probably call me a charlatan for believing in it. I'm not trying to convince you, but you know, we can step back and say, okay, well, you know, if it's not something we really believe in, then it doesn't mean anything anyway. You know, I think some people might say the tarot is about the power of suggestion, and so that if we see a negative card, then, you know, that's going to happen because we believe it. Personally, I don't think the tarot is about the power of suggestion, but what I would say is that I think psychologically you can let the cards get to you. So again, you know, if you can't cope with seeing a card like the Three of Swords or the Ten of Swords or the Tower, then doing a tarot reading is not a wise thing to do, because psychologically I think there needs to be a degree of resilience when doing readings for oneself, and also when giving those readings to other people. So I don't know whether you've had really bad weather where you are, but it's been extremely wet and rainy, and this weekend, I'm sorry if the lighting's really bad, I don't own any sort of lights or anything fancy. I usually rely on sunlight, but we haven't had a lot of that. It's been sort of sunny today, and I've obviously made use of that time with the dogs and with family. So now I've come home, it's all sort of gloomy again, and it's just so nice to be with you and talking about a subject I love and just having a lovely warm cup of tea. So if you excuse me, I'm going to have some peppermint. It's such a wonderful, simple tea. I think even though it's so simple, peppermint is one of my favourites. Okay, so let's shuffle again. Interestingly, I got strength again, but this time in reverse. Now this kind of makes me think about reversals just in general. So me personally, I don't work with reversals, and that's because for me, I'm feeling and reading the energy. I'm also listening to things. So sometimes I'll hear a sentence, I'll hear a clue about something, but mainly I'm looking for where the card lands in the spread and sort of its placement in the whole spread itself, but also how it's relating to the cards around it. And that will really tell me whether this is something that's in reverse or not in terms of its meaning. So even upright, if this card was around, say, darker cards or, you know, cards that kind of indicated that there could be a loss of something in some way, I might start to see this as being in a reversed energy. But I think that we can read both sides of that card in every spread anyway. So if this landed upright, for me, this isn't just saying, okay, you need strength. There might be aspects of the card that stand out to me. So she is holding the lion's mouth almost closed. And perhaps if I saw this around a lot of sword related cards, maybe the Page of Swords, things that I would associate with communication, then I might see if this was in reverse, there might be a need to stay quiet. You know, if say it appeared with the Hanged Man or cards that I associate with stillness. If I saw it upright, it might be a case of perhaps with the Hierophant upright, maybe there's a need to speak up about something. So I'm not saying that's what I'd see in every reading, that's just an example. Because in other readings, I might see this as needing a lot of internal strength or a lot of compassion. So the card, when you learn the card in isolation as to its meaning, that meaning changes in accordance with the cards that are around it. I also do learn aspects of the Kabbalistic side of tarot, and sometimes I will see that in the cards as well. So there are many, many layers, I think, to becoming a confident tarot reader, and to, you know, what's the proof in the pudding? I think the proof in the pudding is that when you give the reading, it makes sense to somebody, maybe not in that moment, but it might actually be at a later date, and that the things that you sort of say you're seeing are likely to occur, or, you know, are conditions of that reading. You know, that those things are actually happening or will happen. Knight of Cups. So the Knight of Cups is traditionally a card about love, romance. It can also be about being a dreamer, an idealist. The horse in the card is moving. So, you know, this is not like the Knight of Pentacles, which is a horse that's a Shire horse usually, that's standing still. You know, this is a delicate horse that's moving forwards. Because it's a Cups card, it's usually associated with the element of water, emotions, feelings. There's a river on this Rider-Waite deck. There's a river underneath the horse in the background as well. And of course, we can't really see what's in the cup. It could be an empty cup, or it could be a cup full of water. We don't know. So maybe this person's waiting to receive a proposal or is offering a proposal. But I feel like a lot of people will consult the tarot in relation to career, in relation to love. And whilst I don't think that's, you know, a bad thing to do, I do feel like we need to be careful in matters of the heart, that we don't misuse these tools and become overly addicted to them, to the point where we can't make our own decisions and we feel like we're losing our free will. Because with any oracle, we always have freedom to choose. And I feel like these tools are something that can help us make decisions, but ultimately, just like seeking advice from a friend, it's still on us, right? It's still on us to make our decision. And we have to be careful when we're consulting this in relation to other people. So let's say we wanted to do a spread to see if somebody we fancied loved us back and was interested. you know, that at that point we are starting to delve into ethics here, because we're wanting to understand how someone feels about us, and we might be looking at ways that we can influence their emotions. And I do feel we have to be very careful in those sorts of readings. And you know, I haven't really visited a lot of witchcraft on my series so far. I've kind of been gradually talking about some of these subject matter areas, but just like with witchcraft, I think there's an element of ethics involved with how we use our tools. And so I would refrain from, you know, using tarot in any way that would manipulate someone else's feelings. Okay, let's see what we've got next. I've never done this before. This is an experiment. I was suddenly thinking, how will I stay on topic? How will I, you know, choose what to say? I don't want to script this. And I thought, I know, just let's use the deck. The Magician. So I see the Magician tarot card as being very much about action, about drawing down the energy of spirit and then, you know, trying to manifest that into something, trying to create something. So it's like a creative energy, but in a very directive way. So it's an action-based card, whereas the Empress is a creative card, but it's a bit more receptive in its energy. And the same for the High Priestess. That's also quite a receptive card. So yeah, this card is very much about action. And I'm kind of thinking about how we use tarot cards in magic. Can tarot cards be used in magic? So I'm sure if you have experience of divination, you're probably nodding, yes, you know, we can use tarot cards in witchcraft, in magic. Now, when I use the term witchcraft, what do I mean? I'm meaning working with energy to, like the Magician, work it and manifest it towards an outcome of our intention, of our choice. So it's you know, about willpower really, and willing something to happen. That's what I'm talking about when I use the term witchcraft. So the manipulation of energies through will to create an outcome. And you know, I would say yes, we can use tarot cards for witchcraft. We can use it when we're using our own intention, setting spells for ourselves, you know, to sort of attract energies into our situation. So one way that I've used tarot cards in my workings, I prefer to use the term workings to like magic spell. I find magic spell just sounds a little bit too fairy tale, whereas, you know, it's a piece of work, it's a project, it's something I'm creating. So I tend to use candles a lot in my workings, and I've used a card to sort of focus my intention. I've also used another deck, which I use just for magical purposes, and I'll use a card underneath the candle that I'm burning down. And I won't just sort of rely on that, you know, there's a ritual around it and a way that I set my intention. But absolutely, I would say that yes, you can use tarot cards to help you to achieve magical workings. Oh, the Ace of Pentacles. So as I'm looking at this card right now, I'm thinking about gifts and our skills and our talents. I think that everybody can read tarot? Yeah, I think to a certain extent everybody can, just the same as everybody can sing. But I think, can everybody sing really well? I would say no, and I think it's the same with tarot. There's also the kind of, what are you gifted in terms of your skill set versus what are you taught, or what have you taught yourself? I think probably the best readers have both. They have a natural gift, a natural propensity to be able to work intuitively and sort of read signs and symbols, and perhaps have aspects of clairvoyance as well, clairaudience, being able to see things, hear things, smell things, you know, all of the senses and extra senses as well. But also aren't lazy, you know, they spend time as scholars learning, these cards, learning the true meanings of them, and the different layers and subtleties to the cards, and then over time, a lot of time, building up that practice. Can anybody grab a tarot deck and, you know, a book and sort of do a simple spread and sort of get the gist of what it means? I think probably yes, but you know, there is a risk of sort of misreading it, and I think also just not really getting all of the information. I kind of see working with divination tools as being a bit like a cosmic download, and this is like, it's almost as if there's data in the cloud and we're drawing it down to analyze it. And so to be able to do that, I think you need to have like a natural gift, as well as having learnt those symbols and their meanings. I also think that when we want something a lot, we put that into our minds. So for example, let's use the analogy of a pink elephant. And you know, everybody right now who's watching this, I really would like you to think of a pink elephant. And now I want you to not think of a pink elephant. You know, some of you will achieve it, but most people, it's right in your head because you've got it in there. And so when we're doing a tarot reading, either for ourselves or for someone else, I think there's a real risk of wanting to see information about something so badly that we'll see it when it's not there. I think there's a risk of putting the meaning into the cards that we want to see. And I've known people do this, where I've delivered a message to them and maybe it's not been the message they wanted to hear, and so they've twisted that message into something much nicer and lighter and gone, no, I think it's about this. And those will be individuals who have never studied tarot ever, but are telling me what these cards must be meaning. And you can tell at the time, you know, this is not really something that they're going to benefit from, because they already have this rigid idea in their heads about what they do and don't want to hear and see. So I think that, you know, we have to be careful that we don't read into the reading what we want to see. Four of Swords. So immediately I think of rest, and this makes me think about the need to not constantly be using your cards. And this is like anything that can be potentially addictive. So, you know, scrolling on your phone, you know, substances, addiction to validation. You know, we can get addicted to anything, foods, and tarot can be no different. You know, as somebody reading for yourself or someone who's going to receive a reading, if it gets to the point where, you know, you feel you can't make a decision in your life without consulting the tarot cards or getting somebody to give you a tarot reading, I think there's a point there when you need to probably consider taking a sabbatical from it, or maybe just not going back to it, because tarot isn't there to make all your decisions for you. As I've said, it's, you know, something to consider consulting, but ultimately, you know, we can't remove responsibility from our lives. You know, we are responsible, and we can't, you know, look out the window every second to see what's about to happen next. You know, there is a lot of unknowns to being human. So I think there's a risk that sometimes people could get addicted to needing to consult the tarot cards before they move forward with decisions in their lives, and I think that's quite unhealthy. The Sun. So this makes me think about, you know, what are the positives? What are the most positive aspects of using tarot? For me, it just feels very natural to me, I'll be honest. It's something that's just been a part of my life for so long. I've grown up around tarot. I feel that it can be a real source of clarity, which is often what the Sun can indicate. I think that one of the other positives is that, like coaching, it can offer you options, or, you know, if you ask questions to the tarot. I often don't. As I've said in previous videos, I tend to assume that the energy kind of is directing me already, that it knows what I need to focus on. But I think that, you know, it can be a bit like coaching, where you could set a question or have a sort of theme in mind, and then you can be presented with different possibilities of how a scenario might turn out, or what possible outcomes there could be. So I feel like as a planning tool, as a strategic tool, and almost like a reflective, meditative tool, it can be so beneficial. but that's not going to be the case for everyone. You know, I don't think tarot is for everybody. Something else that I found really helpful about tarot is sometimes in a situation in life, I will just see the image of a tarot card come into my head, and I think it's my brain's way of sort of compartmentalizing a situation and making me kind of align that to something I already know. So, you know, I might have a situation where suddenly the Two of Swords comes into my head and I'm thinking, you know, there's maybe something I don't know here, or indecision, and that's not sort of a psychic magical thing. That's just because I've learnt these symbols over such a long period of time that sometimes the archetypes do help me in other situations as well, so that I can think, this seems like one of those kinds of situations, and you know, what do I think about that type of a situation? What does that tarot card teach me? What has it taught me in the past? And so I might look at it the opposite way. I might be in a life situation and then think of a tarot card rather than consulting the tarot about my life. So I'm going to do the last tarot card pull now. I've no idea how long this video is going to have been. I've just gone with the flow. The Hermit, and he's in reverse, but as I say, I don't really look at reversals. So I think this card is making me tune into how tarot can be used as a way to think about both external conditions as well as internal ones. So the Hermit's quite an inward card, and it's, to me, very much about finding your own light, your own pathway. And I think the tarot can complement that. You know, tarot's not saying this is the direction you must take or this is what will happen. There are times I've done readings where I've been pretty certain something's going to happen, and that's happened a number of times. But, you know, in general, it's an indication of what might happen. I'm so sorry if you can hear snoring, that is Ziggy in the background. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, you know, the Hermit is about finding our own inner wisdom. And so sitting down with a tarot deck, using your favourite spread, asking the questions you need to ask, pulling the cards and looking for synchronicities, consulting, if you work with spirit guides, consulting your spirit guides, that can be a way to gain insight into yourself and into the way you think. And, you know, when we see a card we don't like, we can challenge ourselves about that, and we could ask ourselves, well, why do I feel uncomfortable? Why is this a card that I don't want to see? And I don't mean as something as simple as, oh, I've got the Tower card and I don't want to see the Tower, or the Death card, or the Devil. You know, these are cards that people generally don't like seeing so much. You know, because as I say, every card has a duality. So we might ask ourselves, well, when I see that Devil card, why do I have such a strong repulsion towards it? And I think that can tell us a lot about ourselves and, you know, the conditioning that we have as well. And because we're all conditioned, we've all been exposed to the lives we've had, the ideals we have, you know, the sort of the people, the places, everything around us conditions us into a certain way of behaving and thinking. And I think we can be challenged sometimes. These archetypes can challenge those ideals. And I think that can be a good thing. I think also in terms of just maybe taking even one card and meditating on it and being quite quiet and reflective and introspective, I feel like that's something that tarot does offer. Like for me, it's very much a solo activity. It's something when I want to be the hermit, I'll sit maybe with my candles, be very quiet, snuggle in with the dogs and spend an hour or two with my cards, and maybe I'll journal, and it's really a part of my own journey. But also it can shed light on external factors as well. So I think it can be used in both ways, and it can be used for ourselves, but also something to support other people if they choose that. So I hope you found this episode interesting and useful. If so, please do like if you like and subscribe if you vibe. And yeah, you can find me on Patreon if you're interested in more rune readings and tarot readings. I'm doing general readings for the group on there. I've also made my way over to TikTok, and I was thinking about doing a video about what I've discovered in relation to witchiness on TikTok, because it's been very interesting, I'll be honest. And next week on Wild Witch, I will be doing an episode about the light side of magic and witchcraft. And then the following week, I intend to do an episode about the darker side of magic and witchcraft. So thank you so much for watching. Wild wishes to you wherever you are, and thank you for supporting my channel. I'll see you next week.